Okay, please be seated. All right, the state may call its next witness.
This time the state called Officer Dan Irish.
Hello, officer. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this case? Please take the witness stand. And then will you please remove your mask? Please state your full name and spell it.
Daniel, D-A-N-I-E-L, middle name Lawrence, L-A-W-R-E-N-C-E, last name Irish, I-R-I-S-H.
All right, officer, just a reminder, yes or no answers, no or Okay, if you don't understand a question, the question can be clarified for you. If an objection is made, stop talking and don't answer it unless I tell you to. And don't talk on top of each other. So wait until the question is finished before you answer.
Yes, sir.
Right. Counsel?
Could you state your occupation for the record?
Police officer,
What law enforcement agency are you with currently?
the Champlin Police Department.
How long have you been a police officer?
About 19 and a half years.
Is that dating all the way back to about January of 2003?
Yes, sir, it is.
Did you work anywhere in law enforcement capacity during your time at Champlin?
Yes, I have. I worked for the Anoka County Sheriff's Office part-time in the Court Security Division. I've worked for the City of Dayton as a part-time police officer. I no longer work there. The City of Corcoran part-time as a police officer, and currently with Metro Transit Police as a police officer part-time.
And you're a licensed peace officer?
Yes, sir.
And you take continuing education courses to maintain that license, correct?
Yes, I do.
And you're trained in responding to emergencies?
Yes, I am.
Do you have a specific assignment within the Champlin Police Department?
Currently, I'm assigned to the patrol division as a patrol officer, working day shift, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.
When you're working on patrol in Champlin, are you equipped with body-worn camera?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Have you held any special assignments or duties during your career with Champlin?
Yes, I'm currently a drug recognition expert, instructor, as well as a standardized field sobriety instructor. I'm on the West Metro Mobile Command Field Force. I was on the Anoka Hennepin Drug Task Force. I've been a use of force instructor, and that's about it.
In your work with the West Command Mobile Field Force, have you encountered officers from other departments?
Yes, I have.
And have you encountered officers from the Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park Police Departments?
Yes, I have. They're assigned to our platoon. It's Champlin, Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and Osseo.
As a patrol officer, could you explain your duties?
To patrol the city of Champlin, respond to 911 calls, be proactive with traffic stops and other responsibilities, assist with emergency calls as needed within neighboring jurisdictions.
And do you travel in a marked squad?
Yes, I do.
And how many officers are typically in a squad car in Champlin?
Just one.
And you had alluded to the notion that you respond to emergency calls not only in Champlin?
That's correct.
Where else do you respond to emergencies?
Neighboring agencies that are close by.
Would those communities include Brooklyn Center?
Yes, it would.
Now, when you respond to an emergency in another city, what might your duties or responsibilities entail?
It depends what is happening when I get there and where I'm needed and what kind of work needs to be done.
Am I correct that in addition to being a patrol officer, you have been a field training officer for other officers in your department?
Yes, I have.
Could you explain how the field training program works in Champlin?
In Champlin, the new hire goes through 4 phases of field training, and he's usually with a different officer on each phase. The phase can last anywhere up to a month. They drive, and the FTO sits in the passenger seat and helps guide them as a police officer, teach them about statutes and rights and policy and procedure and all that stuff.
Does that require any special skills or training to be a field training officer?
Yes, you attend a field training officer school, and then it also requires being a good officer and knowing the job and having some experience on.
Describe how in a given day, how that given day may be different if you're functioning as a field training officer versus merely just being an officer. If you're alone in the squad car.
Being alone in the squad car, I'm responsible for myself. When I'm field training, I'm now responsible for that individual, making sure that proper policies and procedures are followed. When I'm alone, I make the decisions on where I'm going, where I'm going to turn, who I'm initially going to stop. When I have a field training officer or trainee, depending on the phase, kind of later phases, they have more latitude on what choices they get to make. In the earlier phases, they don't.
How long have you been a field training officer?
I believe since 2007.
Now, when responding to emergency calls, have you ever needed to provide emergency medical aid?
Yes, I have.
I want to talk about your training and experience in that. As a 19-year police officer, could you describe your medical training for the jury?
Yes, I am currently certified as a first responder in the state of Minnesota.
And you've been certified as a first responder all the way back to 1999, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And have you received special instruction from the U.S. Marshals on medical training?
Yes, we had the U.S. Marshals come into the Champlin Police Department for our annual refresher, providing like a tactical medical training, medical response in kind of a tactical situation.
Now, in terms of the medical interventions you're trained on, am I correct? You're obviously trained on how to check a pulse,
That's correct.
how to conduct CPR,
Yes, sir.
how to place a chest seal on a wound such as a gunshot wound,
Yes, sir.
how an AED or a defibrillator functions,
Correct.
how to apply and to administer a breathing device known as an ambu bag,
Yes, sir.
how to put on and how a Lucas device functions.
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about some of those later. But how often have you had to utilize this degree of medical training as a police officer?
I couldn't even count the number. At the Champlin Police Department, we respond to all medical calls that are dispatched to us. I don't know, I've probably,
How about this? Would you agree that you have to utilize this degree of medical training multiple times per year?
yes, I'd agree with that.
And am I correct that you've actually received 7 commendations or recognition for life-saving work in the field?
Yes, that is correct.
And could you describe what one of those awards means?
It means that I saved somebody's life by providing some sort of act, whether it was CPR or whether it was dragging somebody from a house for carbon monoxide poisoning. But most of them, I believe, are CPR saves.
Today I want to just discuss the events of April 11th, 2021. Do you recall that day?
Yes, sir.
Were you on duty?
Yes, I was.
And did you work your regular 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. shift that day?
Yes, I did.
At approximately 2 p.m., do you recall what you were doing?
Coming back from the Hennepin County Jail
Were
to
you
the
traveling
city.
in your squad car?
Yes, sir, I was.
If I interrupted, I apologize. Could you describe where you were driving about that time?
Roughly 694 interchange.
Okay. Did something occur at that time that attracted your attention?
Yes.
And what was that?
It was on the Hennepin County East Main, or I think they call it Law 1 now. I heard 3200, which is the city of Brooklyn Center, call out shots fired.
Shots fired. Better just back up to help everybody understand what are you listening to, what's the 32 Main, help us understand what you're doing as you're driving back to Champlin at that time.
Okay. Champlin Police Department is on what's called Hennepin Law 2, which is where I get dispatched on. But because I border the city of Brooklyn Park, I also listen to the Hennepin County East Main, or Law 1, where they're dispatched from. And Brooklyn Center's call number is 3200, and it could be 3200 all the way down to 3235, 38, whatever the case may be.
Okay. So you heard on the Hennepin County East Main channel a call, and that specific information that you heard that occurred in Brooklyn Center was
Shots fired.
shots fired. Okay. When you get a call, when you hear about a shots fired call, what goes in your mind with regard to how you are going to respond?
It's obviously an emergency call, and I'm going to respond lights and siren to the area and find out where I'm needed.
And is that what you did in this case?
That's correct.
And did you get information about the specific location of the shots fired call?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And as you traveled to that area, did you get any other updates about what was going on?
Yes, I heard a Brooklyn Center officer, Officer Salvosa, that I learned later, yelling on the radio that he had one at gunpoint.
And did you arrive in the area that Officer Salvosa identified?
Yes, I did. As I was arriving, I asked where I was needed, and whoever answered me said 63rd and Catherine.
Okay. And so you ended up at 63rd and Catherine.
That's correct.
And what did you do when you arrived at that location?
I got out of my squad car and I walked up to where all the other officers had already kind of mustered and were trying to devise a plan.
Okay. And you basically went there just as you previously said. There was an emergency in another city. How many did? Is that about right?
That's correct, sir.
So as you arrived, you said that there were some other officers devising a plan. Perhaps at this point, could you describe what you see at the scene at that time at 63rd and Catherine?
There was multiple squad cars on scene. There was one crashed, what I believe was either an SUV or a crossover, and then there was a white passenger car crashed up in the front and kind of by the corner and telephone pole maybe.
Okay. And did you encounter Officer Salvosa?
I don't know if I talked to him or seen him right there.
Okay. What were other officers doing in addition to devising a plan?
Trying to get a bunker so that we could use them to approach the vehicle.
Okay. Did officers have their guns drawn, not drawn, or something else?
They had their guns drawn.
Okay. And the objective at that point was what? To approach the white car?
Yes, sir. To approach the white car safely.
Okay. Now, did you have a view of the white car?
I did.
Okay. And when you looked at the white car, did you see any activity in the vehicle?
I did not.
At that point that you arrived, did you see how many individuals were in the vehicle?
I did not.
Okay. Did you learn at any point whether there was anyone that had been removed from the vehicle?
I did, but I don't know at what point I learned that information.
Okay. Did anyone provide any other information about what was going on in that vehicle?
Not really.
Was there any information that anyone in that vehicle had a firearm?
No.
Okay. About, did you have any information about the degree of injury that that person in the vehicle may or may not have?
No.
How many officers were present at that point?
Maybe approximately 10.
Did the group of you ultimately take action toward the white car?
We did.
And could you describe your actions?
We utilized a body bunker and formed up in a tactical line and approached the vehicle on the passenger side. And once we got to the passenger side, somebody was calling for more cover on the driver's side, and so that's when I moved over towards the driver's side.
And when you got to the driver's side, what did you see?
I had seen what I know to be Mr. Wright slumped over in the driver's seat.
What was his condition at that time, based on just your observation?
He was slumped over.
Okay. Would you characterize that as non-responsive?
Yeah, non-responsive, head kind of, I believe, to the right.
Okay. What did you do at that point?
At that point, I moved over to the driver's side door and passenger door and had my gun out as I was trying to look in the back seats. And then another officer finally got the driver's side door open.
Okay. And after the driver's side door opened, What did you do?
Officer Lazenberry from Brooklyn Park Police Department grabbed a hold of Mr. Wright's hands and began to remove him from the vehicle, and I assisted by grabbing a hold of Mr. Wright's shirt and jacket area.
And after you grabbed him, where did you take Mr. Wright?
Right out of the driver's seat and approximately 15 to 25 yards away from the vehicle on the what I'd consider the grass boulevard.
As you laid him on the grass, what did you do at that point?
Started assessing him for injuries.
Did you locate any injuries on Mr. Wright's body?
Yes, we did.
Could you describe the injury that you observed?
A single gunshot wound that appeared to have entered from the left side and exited on the right side.
Did you check his entire body for other injuries?
Yes, we did.
And did you find any?
No, we did not.
So the primary injury that you observed was the gunshot wound to the chest?
That's correct.
You call that a side-to-side from the left to the right?
Yes, sir.
Did you participate in any actions at that point of the life-saving nature?
Yes, I did. Started to remove his clothing. I checked for a pulse on his wrist and also his carotid artery, which is on the neck. And as we were checking him, someone behind me handed me a chest seal. So I put the chest seal onto the exit wound.
Can I pause just a second? Could you just describe what a chest seal is?
A chest seal is you put on and it helps keep like your lung capacity and keep everything in there, and it kind of burps it out so you don't get collapsed lungs.
Did you feel a pulse when you checked his pulse?
I did not.
Okay. After realizing that Mr. Wright did not have a pulse, did you take any other actions?
Yes, we were calling for someone to give us a defibrillator, and at some point someone handed me their AED that they're commonly referred to.
Okay, could you describe what an AED is?
It's for cardiac patients typically. You open it up, it has a couple of electro pads. You put one on the chest and one on the side, and you plug it in and turn it on, and it analyzes for heart rhythms and tells you if a shock is advised or to continue with CPR.
And what happened when you hooked up the pads to Mr. Wright?
It told us to continue with CPR or start CPR.
And is that typical readout that AED gives you in a situation like this?
Yes, depending on what the heart rhythm that it's detecting. If it detects a non-shockable rhythm, and then it advises you to start CPR.
If it did register a shockable rhythm, what would you use the defibrillator for?
To provide a shock.
So because the AED or defibrillator informed you, just recommended to continue CPR, is that what occurred at the scene?
That is correct.
Did you perform that CPR?
I assisted with it. I did not perform the chest compressions.
That was done by other officers?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were there any other life-saving measures attempted by you?
Yes, I assisted with helping out with the oral airway. The oral airway is a plastic airway that's kind of at an angle, kind of like this, that you put in and you turn it around. It helps keep the tongue out of the back of the throat so that you can provide sufficient ventilation. And I assisted with keeping the head, neck, chin tilt so it opens up the airway more, and I held on to the ambu bag to form a seal around Mr. Wright's mouth and chin, and so he could get adequate air from the ambu bag.
During this time, were any paramedics on the scene?
There was a paramedic that arrived. I don't know at what point they walked into the equation.
Just in talking about your background, these decisions that had to get made to check pulse, start CPR, get the AED, get the chest seal on, these decisions which were all directed by law enforcement officers based on your training, correct?
That's correct.
And as to your observations, was everyone able to act in accordance with training?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but at some point you mentioned the paramedics did arrive?
They did.
And do you remember how many minutes into your efforts those paramedics arrived?
I don't. It wasn't very long. Less than 5, I would say.
Okay. What occurred when the paramedics arrived?
I believe they initially checked the pulse and advised us to continue with CPR. Another paramedic, I believe, they have a much larger machine that checks the rhythm of the heart and does other medical stuff, and they call it a 12-lead, and they started putting on the 12-lead stickers all over the body to check for a rhythm.
These are just another whole set of leads that you would put on the body. Is that also basically another version of a defibrillator that if it advised a shock, they could have shocked, but if not, it just tells you to continue CPR?
Yes, and it also shows on the display what the heart rhythm is and other things on that display that I don't.
Sure, it's a more medical, it's something that the paramedics have, not you as an officer, just has in the back. Trunk,
Yes,
right?
yes, sir.
Now, did CPR continue?
It did.
Was there any other additional intervention proposed at that time?
Putting on what's called a Lucas device.
Could you describe what a Lucas device is?
A Lucas device is a device that assists paramedics and other first responders with CPR. It's you have a plastic backboard piece that you slide underneath somebody, and then the top piece clicks into that, and almost a suction cup type thing comes down onto the chest, and I believe it's fueled by or used by like compressed air, and you push start, and it gives the correct depth and rate for CPR. It's used for that, and also because CPR is very strenuous on people to continue for a long period of time.
So it's a very large machine that could sort of replace officers' efforts to conduct CPR on a patient.
That's correct.
And did you ultimately complete installing the Lucas device on Mr. Wright?
No, I believe we only got the backboard piece underneath him.
And why was that?
Because I believe we were directed to stop by one of the medics on scene.
Do you recall why the paramedic directed you to stop?
I don't recall the exact what they said.
At the time that they directed you to stop, did you also understand that that was significant of another conclusion made at the scene?
Yes,
And what was that?
that the party was deceased.
After the paramedic pronounced Mr. Wright dead, what did you do?
I assisted with getting a sheet from the paramedics so that we could cover up his body.
And after you covered Mr. Wright's body, what did you do at the crime scene?
I believe after that, I moved to the east side of the crime scene to help the deputies and others on scene move people back and extend the crime scene tape.
At that point, were you told any information about what actually happened?
No.
Did you know at that point whether Mr. Wright's death pertained to an officer-involved shooting?
I'm going to allow leading on just these preliminary points. Go ahead.
Can you repeat that, sir?
Did you know at any point whether Mr. Wright's death pertained to an officer-involved shooting?
I did not know for sure.
Were you informed whether there were any suspects outstanding at that point? Or
I was not.
Did you complete any other tasks related to this case?
Yes, after I was done on the east side of the crime scene, I went back and stood by Mr. Wright's vehicle and Mr. Wright's body, waiting for any further instructions, and I was approached by Sergeant Lorenz from the Brooklyn Center Police Department. He asked how long I could stay. I advised him as long as he needed me, and then he asked me if I could take Officer Salvosa back to the Brooklyn Center Police Department.
And do you know why that you were asked to bring Officer Salvosa back to the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
One, his car was within the crime scene, and two, it's pretty standard between departments that when you're involved in a critical incident, you have a buddy officer that takes you and stays with you until you're relieved.
When you are asked to be a buddy officer, or sometimes called an escort officer, what parameters do you have typically?
We don't talk about the case. You drive them to whatever location it is. In this case, it was Brooklyn Center Police Department, and we found an empty room by ourselves, which was the upstairs break room, and I sat there with him until I was relieved.
Yep. And did you talk about the case?
No, we did not. A little bit initially about when I got there, but other than that, we just watched TV and talked about other cases.
Yep. And were you eventually relieved?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Now, did you do anything else with regard to the investigation of this case?
No, I don't believe I did.
Did you collect any evidence?
No, I did not.
Did you interview any witnesses?
I did not.
Did you witness any of the events which led to Mr. Wright's death?
I did not.
Okay. Now, during your actions, were you wearing your body-worn camera?
I was.
Okay. And you know that it captured footage of the events that we've discussed this afternoon, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you've had an opportunity to review that footage?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state offers Exhibit 45.
Any objection to Exhibit 45? There being no objection, Exhibit 45 will be admitted and you may publish.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Miller, put that up. If you could pause just at the beginning. Just trying to get bearings, Officer Irish. I'm showing you on the screen an image. Would you agree the timestamp on that says 19:10 and 41 seconds? Do you think that's accurate?
Yes, I learned it's Zulu time.
It's Zulu time. So in Central Standard Time, would you agree that was 2:10 and 41 seconds?
I would.
All right. And could you describe what you see on the screen in front of you?
The officers that were on scene getting ready to devise a plan. The Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center squad car, and the white car was the car that Mr. Wright was in.
Okay, so right in the middle of the screen here, you see like the back quarter panel. That's the white vehicle.
Yes, sir.
And then there are a number of other police officers that you can see on the screen here.
Yes, sir.
Right. Including yourself, you'd agree that at least you see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, at least 8 officers in view, on 7 on the camera, and then including yourself would be 8 right here?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay. You can play that.
And we object on the grounds that this is entirely cumulative.
Would you like to do a sidebar, please? Okay, the objection is sustained.
Mr. Miller, you can continue. Your Honor, you said sustained. You mean overruled, right?
Yes.
Thank you. You can continue, Mr. Miller.
We're just going to block that window. We're coming up. We're moving up.
You're another bunker.
Have another one. All right, I got another one.
Here, we got another bunker, Steve.
Watch out, watch out.
Nobody's in the back.
Double check, we know he's in the back.
Pull that door. Where do you want? The other side? Handgun?
Handgun? Everybody in the back, just here. Hey, let's get our med kit. Yeah, grab a bag. Med bag, please. You got chest wound here. All right. And chest wound here. We got scissors. We need scissors.
Chest.
Chest wound here.
Looks like
We're rolling quick. I got nothing on the back.
nothing. Nope.
Nothing on the back. Okay. Oh, we got another one right there.
No, that's in, that's out.
Use that gas and wipe that out. In and out. I got a clear dressing.
And we're gonna gauze seal.
Clear dressing. Yeah, wipe that out. That's what you got.
What's that?
So in, out. Hold on, I'm gonna take your gun. Do we have tape? Oh, here we go.
Oh, sorry.
Doing chest compressions here? Yep. Let's get an AED.
Where's that AED?
We're good on chest. Yep. Let's do it. I wouldn't do CPR. Okay. I'll wait there. Are we? Yeah, north, right here. That's perfect.
Stand clear. Connect electrodes. Stand clear. Analyzing now. Stand clear.
I believe wounds here, wounds there.
No shock advised.
No shock advised.
Start CPR.
I paused the video at 2:13 and 35 seconds, correct, officer?
Yes, sir.
There's an individual who walked up who placed his hand on Mr. Wright's neck, correct?
That's correct.
Could you identify who you believe that is?
I don't know who he is, but with his uniform walking up, it looks like a North paramedic.
Okay, and what is he doing right now with regard to Mr. Wright's?
Checking for a pulse on his neck.
And you'd agree this is your body on camera, so it's showing what these hands out here that you can see in the video, those are your hands, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there was a device that you were manipulating in the video just in the last minute or two of this video, correct?
That's correct.
And is that the AED that you previously testified about?
Definitely object to that. He already testified to all this, now we're watching the film. Now he's narrating the film.
All right.
403.
Well, Council,
Yeah, I'm just yes, Your Honor, I understand that there's not supposed to be speaking objections. It has been talked about a couple times.
all
Thank you.
right. And, all right, you know what my prior ruling was?
Yes.
All right.
You can continue, Mr. Miller.
Want to start pumping on him with those?
Was he responsive for you guys at all?
No.
We just pulled him out of the car like 3 minutes ago. He was in the back. He was like this the whole time? Yeah.
7767, make it 100% or not.
Yeah, I want you to do CPR for a sec. We'll get the monitor on him. I'm thinking we're probably going to call here. I don't feel anyone. He was like this the whole time.
Whole time? Okay.
Anybody tell me if he's the only one so we have some cards?
No, there's like 2 or 3 others, I think.
You know who I can talk to?
I have no idea, man. That's what I heard in the
These
radio.
don't fit in ours.
It analyzed once and no shock
No
advised.
shock advised
Yep.
ones?
Yep.
Dustin, do you know those fit? Okay.
I get it. Actually, he's filling up on us. I got that airpiece in. All right. I got.
Oh, that's starting to come out.
Yep. That's what we're doing. Yep.
One out here,
I don't know if that's.
in or out, by 2 of them.
Yeah, no, in and
Where?
in is on the left side, out's on the right.
Got a chest here on the
Come
outside.
around and pull these. Get ours on.
Okay, what?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna have
Yep.
another one.
Sorry, I'm kind of stuck on it. There we go. Just a double check. We're in charge mode when we get those on.
Let me know when you want to switch. Right? Yep.
Put these 4 stickers on them as well.
All right, we're doing compressions.
Connect electrodes.
Yeah, I'll take the lower. Go around.
Connect electrodes.
Come around, please. You got the top. Yep. Sorry. Oh, of course.
Tell me when you're ready, Phil.
1 second. You got the 4 on.
4 is on.
Yep.
All right, we're going to stop
Stop
CPR for a
concussions.
second.
Check pulses, guys.
Check pulses.
You got nothing here.
Got nothing.
Nothing.
Some electric.
We're gonna get back on compressions? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, there's some electrical activity.
Okay, let's get the Lucas going then.
Get the Lucas on.
Right here.
Everybody back. So DPEA.
Is that what we got?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Listen,
we're gonna
OIS?
get the back plate over here.
I think so. Okay. Because my partner, she's down
Are we
there.
gonna roll them?
Roll your
I
way
don't know,
first.
I was at the station. I was just on my way back from jail.
Hey, Megan.
Yep.
All
Let's
right.
just roll them.
Roll 'em.
You guys did not sign a poll?
No pulse. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Here, grab that sheet.
Right there. Holy, so that's Lucas. Back plate. There you go. Just cover here.
Yeah, I felt for like 15 seconds. I didn't feel anything. You guys.
We have another ambulance here. One for an officer that was injured. Huh? Good. Yeah. 16 to 03. I'm gonna be stuck down here for a few minutes. Yep, we did that. Did you guys go to him? No, you guys just arrived on scene.
They arrived.
So we won't worry. Do you have?
We're waiting for me.
So I'm gonna grab their run number then.
Okay.
I guess, right?
Yeah.
I'll just
And the video concluded. Officer Irish, going back to April 11th, is it true that most officers on the scene were wearing body-worn cameras?
Yes.
And prior to today, did you have an opportunity to review some still images from other officers' body-worn cameras which fairly and accurately capture images of your actions that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time the state is going to show the jury 7 still images, exhibits 46 through 52.
Thank you, this would be cumulative. 403, Judge.
All right, just a moment. Only one-word objections, please sidebar. Okay, members of the jury, we're going to take our afternoon break a little bit early. So, 20 minutes. Officer, you may step down.
Thank you.
Okay, counsel, I think the most efficient way to do this is to go in chambers so you can show me what you're proposing to show, okay? Okay, thank you, Deputy. We're ready.
Your Honor, did you want to make a record that you're allowing exhibits 46, 49, and 50?
Yes, we went back in chambers and I reviewed the photographs. I found that a number of them were cumulative. And so we restricted the number of photographs taken that will be shown to the jury. Right, please be seated. Okay, Mr. Larson, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Irish, you've previously testified about how you approached Mr. Wright's vehicle, and you testified that you saw Mr. Wright's body slumped. If you saw an image of his position, would you recognize it?
Yes, I would.
At this time, please show Exhibit 46. And Your Honor, the state offers Exhibit 46. I think, has the court received it?
No. Is there any objection to 46? Okay. Number 46 will be admitted over defense objection.
At this time, the state also offers Exhibits 49 and 50.
Okay, and I'm going to allow those exhibits as well over defense objections.
Thank you, Your Honor. You can now publish Exhibit 46. Could you zoom in? Officer Irish, could you describe what you see here on Exhibit 46?
Mr. Wright's body slumped over in the driver's seat.
And is that the position you recall him being in as you approached?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, as you can put that down, Mr. Miller, you've testified about the medical interventions that you and other officers administered to Mr. Wright. As you began that medical intervention, do you recall the number of officers that were surrounding Mr. Wright?
I don't.
Okay. Please put up Exhibit 49. I'm showing you Exhibit 49. Would you agree that this is an image of the lot of you who were attempting life-saving measures on Mr. Wright prior to the arrival of the paramedic?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in fact, if you look way on the right side of that image, do you see someone?
It appears to be the paramedic walking towards us.
And then, Mr. Miller, if you could show Exhibit 50. And what do you see in Exhibit 50, sir?
The paramedic attempting to locate a pulse.
Okay. And are you the individual whose head is immediately seen above the paramedic's head right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was the position when you were administering the AED and other handling the breathing bag?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Take that exhibit down. Now you mentioned I believe you mentioned that you left the scene at approximately 2:48 p.m.?
Around there, yes.
Roundabout. And you completed no further work on the case after that in terms of scene investigation?
That's correct.
Okay. No further questions, John.
Because
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Pauling on behalf of Kim Potter with Earl Gray and Amanda Montgomery, and as you know, we get to ask you questions too.
Yes, sir.
You have had a 19-year career with a lot of different assignments, correct?
Correct.
One of the assignments that you had was to work for the Anoka-Hennepin County Drug Task Force, is that right?
That's correct.
And in so doing, you met Officer Potter's husband, Jeff, did you not?
I have, yes.
Okay. In fact, Jeff is right, the fellow in the suit, isn't that right? You know him.
Yes, I recognize him.
And you have worked with him.
sidebar, please. Allowing the answer to stand.
But in addition to being a member of the Drug Task Force, you're a patrol officer on for various cities in the northern suburbs, correct?
For the city of Corcoran, yes.
Okay. And Dayton.
Yeah, I resigned from there about 5 years ago.
Well, you were, on this day, you were delivering someone to the Hennepin County Jail on a warrant, is that right?
That's correct.
What you had done is arrest somebody, right?
Yes, sir.
Was it a traffic stop by chance, if you remember?
I don't recall what this,
Ask him what a warrant is.
Okay. Is there an objection?
Relevancy?
The objection is overruled.
You had arrested someone on a warrant, is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, and a warrant is an order from the court authorizing you to make that arrest, right?
That's correct.
And when you have an arrest warrant for a body, you bring the body into jail, is that right?
On most warrants, correct.
Okay. So you were coming out of the Hennepin County Jail and you heard this dispatch, is that right?
That's correct.
For shots fired, right?
Yes, sir.
And you didn't know who fired the shot,
No, I did not.
but it really didn't make any difference to you as long as you heard something about a shot fired or shots fired, right?
That's correct.
I mean, so whether or not a police officer fires a shot or someone else fires a shot, you're going to put your lights on and go.
That's correct.
Okay. Without hesitation, right?
Yes, sir.
You knew where the scene was, of course, right?
Yes.
Okay. Could you hear Salvosa, Officer Salvosa, over the dispatch, or did you just have a dispatch saying shots were fired?
I believe it was a Brooklyn Center officer that said shots fired initially.
You can't tell us who that was.
I can't.
Okay. All right. But in any event, you got, it took you about how long to get to the scene? 10 minutes? Would that be about right?
I would say less than 10 minutes.
Okay. And the first thing you saw were two cars which had collided, isn't that right?
Yes, 2 crash cars.
And you've been around a lot of crashes in your career, right?
That's correct.
And you discerned, did you not, that the crash of these two vehicles occurred with a significant force?
Yes.
It was not just a fender bender.
No.
Okay. And the amount of force, you know from your training, is measured by the speed and the weight of the car involved. Is that correct? Those are the kind of the physics of it, right?
More or less, yes, sir.
I'm not telling you you're Einstein or anything, but the amount of damage, it depends on how heavy the car is and how fast it's going, right?
Yes, there was.
And you saw that this was one of the cars, whichever car had stopped caused this, was going at a significant speed in your experience, right?
Yes.
Okay. And when you arrived, you deferred to the judgment of the officer on the scene, that would be Officer Salvosa, as to what to do. Is that right?
No, I don't believe I ever conferred with him.
Well, was he, when you were at the scene and came on the scene, did he have his gun out and ordering the people out of the car, or the woman out of the car, or did you come after that, if you recall?
I came after that.
So you had come after the woman had been taken from the car or walked away from the car at about the same time that the bunker was used. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
Okay. And a bunker is a tactical device to protect police
Yes.
from errant shots, gunshots, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's a protective shield that will rebuff a bullet. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And at the time you were in the line with the bunker, the thought was, at least in your mind, is that this was still a very dangerous situation, right?
That's correct.
And one of the reasons why it was dangerous is that you knew that a car had fled the scene of some arrest, isn't that right?
I knew it fled the scene from something. I just knew there were shots fired.
Well, could you see the lights about a block away, further to the west? Could you remember that at all, officer? I'm not saying you can or not.
No, I didn't focus my attention that way.
But the windows of the car were tinted.
That's
It
correct.
was difficult to see in.
Yes, sir.
That made it more dangerous for you.
Yes, sir.
And one of the most dangerous things you can do is open a car and not know what's inside.
That's correct.
So you moved in with the bunker and finally opened the door, is that right?
Moved in with a bunker and then moved around to the driver's side of the car.
And whether you opened the door or someone else opened the door opened.
Yes.
And Mr. Wright was taken out, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you know how long it was after Mr. Wright had gotten to that point that you had taken him out of the car? Did you know that at the time? How many minutes had elapsed?
I did not.
So your job after that was to engage in life-saving efforts, is that right?
That's correct.
Non-judgmental life-saving efforts to figure out what happened, right?
That's correct.
And the protocols don't allow you to think too hard. You just got to act.
Yes, and that comes from experience.
And apply the necessary equipment as you have it, right?
That's correct.
And there was one part of your testimony that I was a little confused about. When you indicated there was some kind of signal coming from the heart that told you to continue, or one of your officers to continue to do the CPR. Am I right about that? Or did I miss you on that? Help me with that.
From the AED, it said, no shock advised, continue CPR.
Okay. And that's what they did.
That's correct.
Okay. And it did not advise you to stop all efforts, right?
It did not.
Okay. And so you followed that direction, right?
That's correct.
And you did everything that you possibly could
That's correct.
to save his life,
Yes, sir.
which is your charge, right?
I'm sorry, what was
Which
it?
is your charge.
Yes.
I had a couple more questions. When you arrive at a scene, someone tries to be in charge, right? Someone is in charge at some point, right?
At some point, yes.
And it is kind of rank-based. For example, if you have a sergeant on the scene, the sergeant would be more in charge than the patrol officer. And I say that in no disrespect, but that's just the ranking of how this works. Am I right?
In most cases, yes.
Okay. So if you had a scene with 2 patrol officers and 1 sergeant, it would be fair for you to assume that the sergeant would eventually take control of the scene.
Yes, eventually.
That's the protocol too.
Generally, yes.
Okay, and make the calls to dispatch, make the necessary alerts on what's going on.
Yeah, some of the communications.
But it would go to the higher officer.
The communications?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I can talk on my radio as I see fit.
But if the officer, I mean, if there are 2 officers on the scene and the third is a sergeant, the sergeant certainly has discretion to take control and make the dispatches, correct?
Absolutely.
No further questions.
On cross-examination, Mr. Eng asked you whether, when you approached, the nature of the approach, was that a dangerous situation? Do you remember when he asked you that question?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree that the nature of their approach is sometimes based on what you don't know?
Yes.
Not that you knew there was danger, but that you didn't have information about what was afoot.
The objection is sustained.
Did you have information at the scene which allowed you to independently conclude that the scene was dangerous?
Yes, that there were shots fired.
That there was a shot fired?
Yes.
What about the individuals in the vehicle?
I didn't know anything about the individuals in the vehicle.
Mr. Eng asked you about sort of the advisories that the AED machine gives you. Could you list the advisories that the AED machine may give you when you hook it up and turn it on with an individual?
All AEDs are set up so that a lay person that's never used them can plug in the pads and start CPR. It tells you to place pads on patient. It tells you to keep your hands off patient while the machine's analyzing. It tells you that no shock is advised, continue CPR. It will also tell you stand clear from the patient. And you stand clear from the patient, make sure everyone's clear, and it'll tell you to deliver a shock. Those are most of the commands that I believe that an AED will give you.
Okay. So when the AED advised you to continue CPR, it was telling you that there wasn't a chargeable rhythm?
That there wasn't a shockable rhythm.
Shockable rhythm. And it isn't, let me clarify, is there any report that the AED would give you that it ain't even worth CPR?
The objection is sustained.
So again, you testified that it's stand clear or no shockable rhythm, continue CPR.
Yes.
No further questions.
Any further comments?
But what the machine does is help you make decisions and tells you what to do, which is helpful, right?
Yeah, but if I didn't have the machine, I would still make the decision to do CPR if I didn't have a pulse.
But it was helpful to have it, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the reason you use it.
That's correct.
Anything further? Okay. Thank you. You may sit down. Okay, the state may call its next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state calls Officer Jeff Summers.